This board does not require your signature, Mr. Hale. The vote was 6-1. The fence comes down Friday, whether you initial the order or not. That was Diane Probst, president of the Cedar Ridge Estates Homeowners Association for 9 years running, standing on my gravel drive in white kitten heels that kept sinking, telling me my grandfather's pasture fence was now her property to demolish. She had a clipboard, a magenta blazer, and a county sheriff's deputy parked behind her for show. What she did not know, what she had never once bothered to check in the 4 years she spent trying to fold my land into her subdivision, was that the only legally recorded deed to the 40 acres her vote had just carved up was sitting in a fireproof box in my workshop, signed in 1961, and that her association had never owned a single foot of it. The vote was 6-1. The one was me, and the one held the only valid deed. What would you have done, standing in your own drive, holding a paper older than the woman ordering you off it? My name is Walt Hale. I am 62 years old, and for 34 of those years, I worked as a licensed land surveyor for the county before I retired and came back to run cattle on the ground my family has held since before there was a Cedar Ridge anything. 40 acres, give or take, of pasture and timber sloping down to a creek my grandfather dammed by hand the year my father was born. I know that line better than I know my own face because I walked it, chained it, and filed the plat on it myself. Back when the developer who built the houses uphill was still a kid selling fence posts out of a truck. A surveyor learns one thing above all else in 34 years, which is that the ground does not lie and the paper does not lie. And the only lies are in the mouths of people who have read neither. I have testified in boundary disputes. I have watched million-dollar arguments collapse over a single iron pin found in the weeds. I know what a recorded instrument is worth, which is everything, and what an opinion shouted across a fence is worth, which is nothing. I keep records the way my father kept fences, tight, square, and checked twice. There is a manila folder in my shop labeled in pencil, and every letter that association ever sent me went into it at the same day it arrived, with the date and the time written in the corner. Carol used to tease me about it, the way I would log a phone call from the bank or a receipt from the vet. She called it my after-action habit, from my 2 years in the Army before we married, and she was not wrong. You write it down when it happens, because memory bends and paper does not. I want to tell this plain, the way it happened, because I think there are people listening who have a fence of their own and a clipboard coming up the drive. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago this spring. Cancer, quick at the end, the kind that does not give you time to argue. She was the one who answered the door soft when neighbors came. I was the one who walked the boundary. The two of us split the place that way for 30 years without ever discussing it. Her at the kitchen window with the coffee on, and me out past the barn with a measuring wheel. And it worked because we trusted each other to mind our own ends of it. After she was gone, the door went unanswered a while, and the boundary got walked more than it needed to be. Because walking the line was the one thing I knew how to do with my hands when there was nothing else to do with them. Then our granddaughter Maya came to live with me at 15, when her mother could not manage, and the house had a reason to keep the coffee on again. Maya is 17 now, and smarter than I deserve. She does her homework at Carol's kitchen table, and she leaves her boots by the same door. And the first winter she was here, she asked me to teach her to read a plat map, which I did, the way Carol would have wanted somebody in this family to keep learning the ground. Maya is the reason I kept my temper through most of what I'm about to tell you. A man alone might have said things. A man with a kid watching learns to write things down instead. The trouble started small, the way it always does. Cedar Ridge Estates went in on the hill above me in the late 90s, 140 lots of vinyl siding and aspirational lawns. And for 20 years, The association up there left me alone. Then Diane Probst got elected president. And the year after that, her husband Greg formed a company called Ridgeline Development Partners. And the year after that, the letters started. The first one came on a Tuesday in March, 3 years back. It was a notice of covenant violation, very official, demanding I remove a, quote, dilapidated agricultural structure visible from association common areas. The dilapidated structure was my grandfather's hay barn. I read it twice, wrote the date in the corner, and put it in the folder. Then I drove up to the clubhouse to explain, like a reasonable man, that my property was not part of their association and never had been. Diane met me in the parking lot. She had the clipboard even then, and a travel mug of something with a paper sleeve on it, and white sneakers that had never seen dirt. The lot was fresh seal coat, black and shining, and her whole self looked like it belonged to a different climate than the one my boots came from. I had bits of hay on my jeans. I did not care. I had come to be reasonable. Mr. Hale, every parcel inside the Cedar Ridge planning area is subject to community standards, she said, not looking up from the clipboard. Your barn is an eyesore. The board has discretion over aesthetic harmony throughout the jurisdiction. I told her my land was not in her jurisdiction. I told her it was deeded separately, recorded before the subdivision existed, and that no one had ever annexed it. I said it slow because I have explained boundaries to angry people across a lot of fence lines. And slow is how you do it. She smiled the way you smile at a child who has gotten the answer wrong, and she clicked her pen. Everything south of the ridge is functionally part of our community, Mr. Hale. We will sort out the paperwork. We always do. That was the first time I heard the word functionally. I would hear it a lot. I drove home with the window down and the smell of cut hay coming back to me. And I thought about how a person can say a word like jurisdiction with such confidence and never once have read the document that would tell her whether the word was true. I went home and did what a surveyor does. I pulled my own copy of the recorded plat, the one with my chain measurements and my seal on it, and I laid it next to the subdivision's declaration of covenants. The covenant document described the association's land by lot and block, every parcel numbered, every boundary mités and bounds. My 40 acres were not in it. Not one clause, not one lot number. The southern edge of Cedar Ridge Estates stopped clean at the old county road, and my ground began on the other side of it. There was no annexation amendment, no signature, no recorded instrument of any kind tying my grandfather's pasture to their declaration. I had built half my career on reading exactly this kind of document, and I read it cold 3 times to be sure I was not letting pride make me wrong. I was not wrong. So I wrote Diane a letter, polite, citing the recording numbers, and I mailed it certified. I kept the green card when it came back. That should have been the end of it. With most people, it would have been. Diane Probst did not answer my letter, though. She sent another notice instead. This one fined me. $200 for the barn, plus $50 a day until compliance. I had never agreed to be a member of anything, never signed a covenant, never paid a due. And here was an invoice with a late fee already accruing. I filed it. By the end of that first summer, the folder had 9 letters in it, and the running fine, on paper, stood at $4,100 I had no intention of paying, and they had no standing to collect. Here is the thing about a man who keeps records. He is patient in a way that looks like weakness to people who do not. Diane saw a quiet old rancher who drove up once to complain and then went home. She thought she was winning. Every notice she sent, I filed. Every fine she invented, I noted. I was not ignoring her. I was building something, the way you build a fence, one post at a time, and she could not see the line of it yet. The second year, it got personal and it got organized. A man in a polo shirt showed up at my gate on a Thursday morning in May with a laminated badge clipped to his pocket and a clipboard of his own. The polo had the Cedar Ridge logo stitched over the heart and a sweat ring already starting under the arms, because it was warm and he had walked up from a car he had parked crooked on my gravel. He said he was a Cedar Ridge compliance inspector and he needed access to document violations. I asked to see identification with a county or state seal on it. He showed me the laminated card. It had the association logo and his name, Brett, and absolutely no legal authority of any kind. I have stood next to real county inspectors for 30 years, watched them flip open a leather case with a state seal embossed in it, watched them write a citation that holds up. I know what their paper looks like. This was a man with a label maker and a borrowed sense of importance. "You are not coming onto this land without a court order," I told him, level, with my hand resting on the top rail of the gate my grandfather hung. Brett got red in the face. He pulled himself up and said I was obstructing an official inspection and that the board took obstruction very seriously. I told him there was nothing official about him and that the board could take whatever it liked. He stood there a second working his jaw. Then he took photographs over the fence of my barn, my cattle, my truck, holding the phone up high like the extra 6 inches made it legal, and he drove off too fast and fishtailed on the gravel. That afternoon, I got a notice accusing me of, quote, threatening association personnel and refusing lawful inspection. The fine for that was $500. I wrote the date in the corner. 11 letters now. Maya was home that day, 16 then, and she watched the whole thing from the porch. After Brett left, she came down to the gate and stood next to me. She did not say anything for a minute. Then she said, "Grandpa, you should get a camera." She was right. We drove to town that weekend and bought 2 trail cameras and a doorbell camera, and I set them to save to a card and to my phone both. 2 copies of everything, the way I save every survey. From that Thursday on, I had a record that was not just paper. It was Maya, going through the county's online property portal for a school project on local history, who found the first thread of what was really going on. She came into the shop one evening with the laptop balanced on one arm, the screen lighting up her face in the dark of the bay, and she said, "Grandpa, why does Ridgeline Development own the 3 lots right against our north line?" I did not have an answer. So we cleared a space on the workbench, and we looked, the 2 of us, her clicking and me reading over her shoulder with my glasses pushed up. Greg Probst's company had quietly bought the 3 Cedar Ridge lots that bordered my pasture over the previous 18 months, paying cash, recorded in the company name. And it had filed a preliminary plat with the county planning office for something called Cedar Ridge Phase 2, a 48-unit expansion. I had Maya pull the preliminary plat up full size, and I leaned in close, and my stomach dropped at the way it does when you read a number you already suspected. The proposed road, the proposed lots, the proposed stormwater pond, all of it ran straight across my 40 acres, as if my 40 acres were already theirs. The drawing simply absorbed my pasture, my barn, my creek, into the development as buildable land. There was a note in the corner of the plat, in surveyor's shorthand, that made my jaw tighten. It read, "Parcel acquisition pending HOA action." Maya read it too. She's quick. "Pending HOA action," she said quietly. "Grandpa, the fines are not about the barn at all." No, they were not. That was the motive, finally, in plain sight. The fines were not about a barn. The barn was a wedge. They needed my land for the road and the pond, and they could not buy it because I would not sell. So they were going to manufacture a paper trail that made it look like the association had always had authority over my ground, find me into a corner, and take it through a lien and a forced sale. Greg's company stood to clear several $1 million on Phase 2. Diane's vote was the tool. The clipboard was the cover. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make Diane into a cartoon. She was not stupid. She believed, I think, the things she kept saying, that everything south of the ridge was functionally hers. Because for 9 years, no one had told her no and meant it. She had a husband whispering numbers in her ear and a board that rubber-stamped her. And somewhere along the way, she stopped checking whether the things she said were true. That is not cartoon villainy. That is just a person who never opened the deed. I opened the deed. Let me tell you about the deed. In 1961, my grandfather, Roy Hale, paid off the last of the mortgage on this ground and recorded a warranty deed at the county courthouse. 40 acres described by metes and bounds running from the old county road on the north to the center line of the creek on the south. It is signed by the seller, witnessed, notarized, and stamped with the recorder's date and book and page. I have read 10,000 deeds in my career, and I can tell you this one is clean. It is the root of my title, unbroken, every transfer since accounted for, and it predates the Cedar Ridge subdivision by 37 years. When the developer platted Cedar Ridge in the late 90s, the surveyor who drew it, a careful man named Hollis I knew from the county days, drew the south boundary of the subdivision to stop exactly at the old county road, because he had pulled my grandfather's deed and knew where the line was and was too good at his job to draw it anywhere else. The subdivision and my pasture have never legally touched. The deed says so. The plat says so. The recorder's books say so. The only people who did not know it were the people who never looked. I kept that deed in a fireproof box in the shop, in a plastic sleeve, with a certified copy I had pulled from the courthouse clipped behind the original. I knew what I had. The question, the only question, was when to put it on the table. The third year is when it turned dangerous. By then, the fine, on paper, had crossed $11,000, and the association had recorded a lien against my property at the county. A lien they had no standing to file against land they did not own. But a lien on the books all the same. The kind that can cloud a title and trigger a foreclosure sale if it is not challenged. That is the part that worried me, more than the fines. A fine you can ignore. A recorded lien sits in the county records and waits. And if you die or get sick or just stop paying attention, it can ripen into a sale, and your heirs find out the hard way. So I drove to the county clerk's office on a Monday morning, and I talked to a deputy named Sam Ortiz, who I had known a little over the years from running into him at the feed store, where he bought dog food in 50-pound bags for a blue heeler he was proud of. I laid the whole thing out for him at the counter, calm, with the folder open and the pages turned to the lien. Sam listened, and then he said the thing that honest officers say. "Walt, I believe you. Here is how it works, though. They filed a complaint, they filed a lien, and on paper it is a civil dispute. I cannot make them stop just because you are right. You have to build it. Document every single contact, every notice, every time they set foot on your land. You get a pattern, a real pattern, and you bring it to the county attorney, and then it is not your word against hers. It is a record." He paused. "How many incidents you got logged?" I told him. 14 letters, 2 trespass events on camera, 1 lien. "Keep going," he said. "When you have got it tight, you will know." I kept going. That is the part nobody tells you about being right. Being right is not enough. You have to be patient and right at the same time, and patience is the harder of the two. The escalations came faster that year. In June, Diane sent a letter to the 3 ranchers I sold hay to every season on association letterhead, informing them that purchasing agricultural products from a, quote, non-compliant property in violation of community standards exposed them to liability. It was nonsense, the kind of nonsense that works anyway, because most people will back away from a word like liability rather than test it. 2 of the 3 got nervous and stopped buying. That cost me real money, about $6,000 in lost hay sales over the season, and it was meant to. One of the ranchers, an old boy named Pete Cawley, who had bought hay from my grandfather and then from me for going on 50 years between them, drove out to the place instead of just calling. He got out of his truck slow, the way men our age get out of trucks, and he had the letter folded in his shirt pocket. He laid it on my tailgate and smoothed it flat with one big hand. "Walt, this here is the dirtiest thing I have seen in 40 years of doing business," he said, threatening a man's customers over a barn. "I bought hay off your granddad when your daddy was throwing bales, and I am not going to be run off by some woman in a golf cart who has never put up a load of hay in her life. You need a witness. You put my name down. I will say it to her face, and I will say it to a judge." I wrote Pete down as a witness that afternoon. That was the first ally, and Diane had handed him to me herself, by reaching for the one thing a rancher will not stand for, which is somebody coming after a neighbor's living. In August, a crew Diane hired drove a post hole auger onto the easement at the top of my drive and started setting survey stakes for the Phase 2 road on my land without permission. They wore vests and hard hats, and they had a real-looking transit set up on a tripod, which is the part that got me, because they had paid an actual surveyor to stake a road across ground their client did not own. And either that surveyor had not pulled the deed or had been told not to. Maya caught all of it on the trail camera. 2 angles, time-stamped, the auger biting into my drive, and a stake going in not 40 feet from my grandfather's gate. I called Sam, and he came out in his own truck and stood in the drive with his thumbs in his belt and told them, polite and immovable, that they were on private property and needed to pack it up. They argued. He did not. They left. He wrote it up as a documented trespass, the first one with a deputy's name on it. The stakes I pulled out of my own ground with my own hands and kept, labeled with the date, leaned in the corner of the barn next to the ones my grandfather had cut by hand. I did not throw them out. A surveyor learns that the stake you pull is sometimes the stake you need to show somebody later. Then, in September, Diane did the thing that turned the whole county against her, though she did not feel it yet. It was a Saturday, about 4 in the afternoon, and Maya was home alone. I had run to town for a part. A truck from the development pulled up to my gate, and 2 men got out with bolt cutters and started on the chain my grandfather had hung. Maya, 17 and alone, did exactly what I had taught her. She did not go out there. She locked the door, she called me, and she called 911, and she held her phone up to the window and recorded the whole thing. I still have that call. Her voice on it is the worst sound I have ever heard, because she was trying so hard to be calm. "Grandpa, there are men cutting the gate." "No, I am inside. I locked it. There are 2 of them. One has a sweatshirt that says Ridgeline." Then the dispatcher, and then Maya again, smaller. "Please hurry." I broke every speed law getting home. Sam beat me there. The men were gone by the time he arrived. But the chain was cut, the gate was open, and the trail camera had their faces, their truck, and the Ridgeline logo in 1,440 pixels of daylight. Maya was fine. She was shaking, and she was furious, and she was fine. I held on to her on the porch for a long time, and I did not write anything in a corner that night. Some things you do not file. You just hold your kid. The next morning, calm again, I filed. The cut chain, the 911 recording, the camera footage, all of it, into the folder, which was a binder by then. 3 inches thick, and I knew, the way Sam said I would know, that it was tight. Here is the part where I tell you what I did with all of it, because building the record was only half the job. The other half was choosing the room. I could have sued. A lawsuit would have taken 2 years and a lot of money, and it would have stayed quiet, between lawyers, the way they like it. I did not want quiet. I wanted it in front of the people Diane performed for, the board and the neighbors who thought she was protecting their property values. So I waited for the one meeting where all of it would be in the room at once. The annual Cedar Ridge budget meeting, the second Tuesday in October, held in the clubhouse, open to all members and, by their own bylaws, open to the public. The meeting where the board would vote to approve the Phase 2 preliminary plat and the special assessment to fund the road. The road across my land. The vote was the trap, not mine, hers, because to approve that plat, the board had to formally assert on the record in front of witnesses that the association had authority over my 40 acres. They had to commit, out loud, to the lie. And I was going to let them. I called the county attorney's office the week before and laid out the binder for a young assistant named Dana Foss, who got very quiet and very interested when she saw the lien filed against land the recorded plat showed was never annexed. She turned the pages slow and asked good questions, the kind that told me she had read a survey before. When she got to the 911 recording, she set her pen down. I asked her one favor. I asked her to be at that meeting, in the back, as a member of the public, and to say nothing unless the board did the thing I expected them to do. She said she would bring a colleague, and she said it in the flat way attorneys say things when they have already decided you are going to win and they do not want to jinx it. I called Sam too. He said he would be there, off duty, in the parking lot, just in case, because he had seen the 911 footage, and he did not like the look of Greg Probst's crew. And I told Maya she did not have to come. She looked at me across Carol's kitchen table like I had lost my mind. I am coming, she said. I have been there the whole time. I locked the door, Grandpa. I get to see the end of it. She had earned it, so she came. The clubhouse was full that Tuesday. Folding chairs, maybe 60 neighbors. A long table at the front with the 7 board members behind it. Diane in the center in a fresh magenta blazer, with a gavel she did not need. Greg sat in the front row of the audience with 2 men from his company, leaned back, comfortable. I sat in the 3rd row with Maya beside me and a slim accordion folder on my lap. I did not bring the binder. I brought one sleeve with one document in it and a certified copy behind it. The meeting ground through its business. Then Diane brought up Phase 2, and the room leaned in, and she made her speech about growth and shared infrastructure and the community's vision for the southern parcels. The southern parcels. She meant my pasture. She put the plat up on a screen, the one with the road running across my grandfather's creek, and she asked the board to approve it and to authorize the special assessment. A board member I did not know, a nervous man at the end of the table named Curtis, raised a finger. Diane, the Hale parcel. Are we clear on that? Because he keeps saying it is not ours. Diane did not even pause. The Hale parcel is functionally part of Cedar Ridge, and has been since before any of us. Mr. Hale has been non-compliant for 3 years. The association's authority over the southern boundary is well established. We will deal with his paperwork through the lien, as we have discussed. Now, all in favor of approving the Phase 2 plat and the assessment. 6 hands went up. Curtis hesitated, looked at me, looked at Diane, and raised his too. Then he was the 7th, and there was no one left to be the one. The vote was unanimous on the board, 7-0, and Diane said it out loud for the minutes. The motion carries. The plat is approved. The southern parcels are incorporated into the Phase 2 development. She had committed, on the record, in front of 60 witnesses, and though she did not know it, 2 attorneys from the county. She had asserted authority over my land to take it. Now there was only one thing left for me to do, and it was the quietest thing in the world. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I have never had to raise my voice when the paper does the talking. Madam President, the bylaws allow members and the public to address the board. I would like 30 seconds. Diane smiled, sensing theater she thought she would win. Mr. Hale, you are not a member, but in the interest of fairness, 30 seconds. I walked to the front. I did not look at Diane. I laid the plastic sleeve on the table in front of Curtis, the nervous one, because he was the one who had asked the honest question, and I slid it so the whole table could see. This is a warranty deed, I said, recorded at the county courthouse in 1961. Book and page on the stamp, signed and notarized, describing 40 acres from the old county road to the center of the creek. It is the root of title to the land you just voted to build a road across. Behind it is a certified copy I pulled last week, so you do not have to take my word that it is current. I set down the second paper, the subdivision's own declaration of covenants. This is your declaration. Every parcel you have authority over is listed in it by lot and block. My 40 acres are not in it. There is no annexation amendment in the county records. There never was. You have just voted, on the record, to develop land your own founding documents say you have never owned. The room was so quiet, I could hear the projector fan. Diane's smile did not fall all at once. It came apart in pieces. That deed is not. Our authority over the southern boundary is well established. The lien, we have a recorded lien. From the back of the room, a calm voice. Dana Foss stood up, the assistant county attorney, and held up her own identification. Ms. Probst, I am with the county attorney's office. The lien you are referencing was filed against a parcel that the county's own recorded plat shows was never annexed to your association. Filing a lien against property you have no legal interest in and voting to develop it, those are not nothing. I would advise this board to retain counsel before it adjourns. I watched Diane Probst's authority leave her in real time. It was not loud. It was just gone, the way a fence looks after the posts are pulled and only the wire is left lying in the grass. She sat down without deciding to, found her chair behind her with one hand, and the gavel she did not need stayed flat on the table where she had set it. Nobody in the room said a word for a long moment. 60 neighbors who had spent the evening nodding along were looking at the screen, at the road drawn across a creek none of them had ever walked to. And then at the old man and the deed and the 2 attorneys standing up in the back, and you could watch them rearranging in their heads everything they thought they had known about the southern parcels. Greg Probst was already on his phone in the front row, talking low and fast to somebody, his comfortable lean gone. Maya found my hand and held it. I let the paper sit on the table and said nothing more, because everything that needed saying was lying there in a plastic sleeve, recorded in 1961. And it did not need my help. Here is the paired arithmetic of the thing, the 2 numbers I want you to hold next to each other. In 9 years as president, Diane Probst had collected, by her own published records, over $400,000 in association dues and fines, and she had wielded it like a queen. Against me, she had logged 22 violation notices, $11,000 in fines, 1 illegal lien, 2 trespasses, and 1 cut chain on a Saturday afternoon with my granddaughter alone inside the house. And in all of that, the number that ended it was one. One deed. Recorded in 1961. The fines collected from me, in 3 years of letters and threats and a crew with bolt cutters, came to exactly $0 because I never owed them a cent. And the deed had said so the entire time. The consequence fell where it always falls, on the scheme itself. Phase 2 could not be built because the road and the stormwater pond and a quarter of the proposed lots sat on land Ridgeline could not acquire. And you cannot run a stormwater plan around a creek you do not own. The bank that had pre-approved the development financing pulled it within a month once the title problem surfaced, because a lender will forgive almost anything except a cloud on the collateral. The county attorney opened a review of the lien filing and the trespass. And Greg Probst's company, which had borrowed against the assumption of Phase 2 going through, defaulted on the 3 lots it had already bought against my north line. Those lots went back to the bank. The road that was going to run across my grandfather's creek now runs nowhere, because there was never any honest way for it to run anywhere. Diane resigned the presidency before the November meeting, not because anyone forced her, but because the board that had raised 7 hands now would not return her calls. I heard later she stopped coming to the clubhouse at all. Curtis, the nervous one who had asked the only honest question in the room, became the new president. And the first thing he did was send me a short letter on plain white paper with no logo on it at all, withdrawing every notice and formally releasing the lien at the county. I filed it, of course. Last page in the binder, behind everything else, the one piece of their paper I was glad to have. The neighbors, the 60 in the folding chairs, they were not villains either. Most of them came up to me afterward, a little ashamed, and said they had always wondered about the southern parcels and never asked. One woman, maybe 40, with a toddler on her hip, said her own back fence had been cited the year before and she had just paid the fine, $200, never once thinking she could ask to see the authority behind it. She asked me how she would even check. I told her to pull her own deed and read the legal description, and to ask the association for the recorded covenant that her lot was actually subject to, by book and page, and she wrote it down on the back of the meeting agenda. That is the thing Diane counted on all those years. Nobody asked to see the deed. Nobody read the declaration. They just paid and deferred, and let functionally become true through sheer repetition, until one man with a fireproof box in his shop said no and meant it in a room with witnesses. That winter, Maya and I walked the south line together in fresh snow, down to the creek and the old hand-built dam my grandfather raised the year my father was born. The snow was clean and the creek was running black and quiet under a skin of ice at the edges, and our breath hung in front of us. I brushed the snow off the iron pin my grandfather set in 1961 and showed her, beside it, the pin I reset with my own hands in the year she was born. The two of them a few feet apart on the same line, 60 years between the driving of them. She crouched down and put her gloved hand flat on the cold iron. "So this is really where it ends," she said. I told her it was. It is the line on the deed, and it is the line on the ground. And for once in a long while, the two of them agreed in front of everybody. Carol would have liked that the kid was the one who found the plat that started it all coming undone. She always said somebody in this family besides me ought to know how to read the ground. She is going to study surveying, Maya tells me now. Lord help the next person who tries to move her fence. Let me step out of the story and tell you the lesson plain, because that is the whole reason I told it. If you own your ground, get the deed, the actual recorded deed, with the book and page stamped on it, not a tax bill, not a closing statement, the deed. Read the legal description and walk it against the ground until you can stand on every corner. If somebody claims authority over your property, ask them to put it in writing, and then ask them to show you the recorded instrument that grants it, the annexation, the easement, the covenant, by book and page. If they cannot, they do not have it. Write down every contact, the date and the time, and keep 2 copies of anything that matters. Put a camera where it can see your gate. Be polite, be patient, and file everything. Because the day comes when a calm binder beats a loud clipboard every single time. The law is slow, and it favors the person who showed up with the paper. If you have got a story like this one, a fence, a clipboard, a vote that went the wrong way, put it in the comments. I read them. If this helped, subscribe, because next week I am going to tell you about a retired water rights examiner whose HOA drained his pond to build a splash pad, and what he found in a 1948 state filing that turned the whole thing around. Until then, walk your lines, keep your records, and do not let anybody tell you that functionally is the same as legally. I am Walt Hale. The vote was 6-1. The one held the deed. Take care of yourselves.